The music had not even finished playing when Aiko Tanaka disappeared from her own wedding, and by the time anyone noticed she was gone, the man responsible was already standing inside the reception hall, smiling, raising a glass alongside everyone else. Subscribe and stay until the end, because the identity of the person behind this kidnapping was never who the clan expected. Ren Tanaka had built his empire on instinct, the kind of instinct that had kept him alive through 3 decades of territorial wars. Most of his rivals never survived. He trusted very few people completely, but his daughter Aiko occupied a place in his life nothing else ever touched, the one relationship untouched by the calculations that governed everything else inside the organization. Her wedding day was meant to be the rare occasion when Ren allowed himself something resembling peace, watching his daughter marry a man from an allied clan in a ceremony that symbolized exactly the kind of stability he had spent his entire life fighting to build. Instead, it became the day his entire world collapsed in less than 20 minutes. The reception hall overlooked a private garden where guests had gathered for photographs following the ceremony. Aiko stepped outside briefly, accompanied only by her childhood friend Hana, intending to take a moment of quiet before the formal celebration began. Security remained stationed at the perimeter, exactly as protocol required for any major clan gathering, soldiers positioned at every visible entrance and exit. What none of them accounted for was an entrance nobody had thought to secure, a maintenance corridor beneath the garden pavilion that connected to the venue's underground parking structure, a detail buried so deep in architectural blueprints that even Ren's meticulous security planning had overlooked it entirely. Hana later recalled hearing nothing unusual, no struggle, no raised voices, simply a moment when she turned toward the garden's fountain and Aiko was no longer beside her. By the time Hana raised the alarm, precious minutes had already evaporated, and Aiko Tanaka had vanished as completely as if the wedding itself had simply forgotten she existed. Ren's reaction, once informed, carried none of the controlled authority that defined every other moment of his leadership. Witnesses described him moving through the reception hall with an intensity that silenced every conversation in his path, security teams mobilizing within seconds of his first instruction. "Seal every exit," Ren commanded, his voice carrying a controlled fury more dangerous than any open display of rage could have been. "Nobody leaves this property until I understand exactly how this happened." The wedding guests, representing both the Tanaka clan and the allied Mori family that Aiko had just married into, found themselves trapped inside a celebration that had transformed into an interrogation within minutes, every face suddenly viewed through the lens of suspicion neither family had anticipated needing on what should have been a day of unity. The investigation began immediately, led by Ren's longtime security chief, a methodical man named Takeshi, who had served the Tanaka clan for over 20 years. Takeshi understood immediately that whoever had taken Aiko possessed detailed knowledge of the venue's architecture, knowledge that suggested either inside information or significant advance planning that predated the wedding announcement by weeks, possibly months. The first ransom communication arrived within 3 hours, delivered through an encrypted channel that effectively eliminated any possibility of tracing its origin through conventional methods. The message contained no demand for money, no territorial concession, nothing resembling the typical motivations behind clan-related kidnappings. Instead, it contained a single instruction. Ren was to publicly announce his retirement from clan leadership within 48 hours, transferring complete control to a successor of the kidnapper's choosing, or Aiko would not survive the week. The demand stunned everyone investigating the case, because it suggested motivations far more personal and far more dangerous than simple extortion. Whoever orchestrated this wanted Ren's throne specifically, and they were willing to weaponize his daughter's life to claim it. Ren's first instinct pointed toward the Sato clan, a rival organization that had clashed with the Tanaka family over contested shipping territory for nearly a decade. But Takeshi's investigation quickly revealed inconsistencies that made the Sato theory increasingly difficult to sustain. The Sato clan operated through direct confrontation, not elaborate kidnapping schemes requiring intimate knowledge of wedding logistics and venue architecture available only to people with legitimate access to the planning process. Whoever took Aiko had attended planning meetings, reviewed security protocols, possibly even walked the venue grounds during preparation weeks earlier. This was not an external attack. This was someone inside the celebration itself, someone trusted enough to access information that should have remained tightly controlled within Ren's innermost circle. The realization narrowed the suspect pool to a deeply uncomfortable list. The wedding planners, several senior advisors who had attended logistics meetings, members of the Mori family Aiko had just married into, and disturbingly, several of Ren's own longtime lieutenants who possessed exactly the kind of access required. Takeshi began systematically eliminating suspects through alibis and cross-referenced security footage, a process that consumed the first critical day of the 48-hour deadline without producing a definitive answer. The breakthrough came not through investigation, but through Hana, Aiko's childhood friend, who approached Takeshi privately the following morning, with a detail she had initially dismissed as irrelevant. "There's something I didn't mention," Hana said, her voice carrying visible guilt for the delay. 2 weeks before the wedding, Aiko told me she'd discovered something troubling in her father's financial records. Something about misallocated funds connected to a project she wasn't supposed to know about. Takeshi's expression sharpened immediately. "Did she tell anyone else?" "She told me she planned to confront her father about it after the wedding. She didn't want to create tension before the ceremony, but she mentioned someone had been asking unusual questions about the same financial discrepancy in the weeks leading up to the wedding." The detail Hana provided pointed toward a financial project Ren had personally overseen for the past year, an expansion initiative involving significant clan resources directed toward modernizing the organization's shipping infrastructure. Few people possessed detailed knowledge of that project's actual budget allocation. One of those people was Daisuke, Ren's most senior financial advisor, a man who had served the Tanaka clan for 15 years and who had personally managed every detail of the wedding's security logistics alongside Takeshi himself. Takeshi's investigation into Daisuke revealed a pattern that had remained completely invisible until this exact moment. Daisuke had been quietly diverting clan resources from the shipping expansion project for nearly 2 years, building a private financial reserve hidden behind shell investments that mirrored legitimate clan business with enough precision to avoid triggering routine audits. Aiko's discovery of the discrepancy, made entirely by accident while reviewing documents for an unrelated matter, represented an existential threat to everything Daisuke had spent years carefully constructing. If she confronted her father as planned, the resulting investigation would inevitably expose the full scope of his theft, a discovery that would not simply end his career inside the organization, but likely end his life entirely given the severity of betrayal involved. Daisuke could not simply eliminate Aiko without raising immediate suspicion given his close proximity to the family. But removing her temporarily, using her as leverage to force Ren's retirement and install a successor friendly to Daisuke's continued position within the organization, offered a path that simultaneously protected his secret and elevated his own influence dramatically. The kidnapping was never about ransom or territorial advantage. It was about silencing the one person who had accidentally discovered a betrayal capable of destroying everything Daisuke had built, while using the resulting chaos to seize power he had quietly coveted for years beneath a mask of loyal service. Takeshi presented his findings to Ren just 6 hours before the 48-hour deadline, evidence carefully compiled from financial records, security access logs, and Hana's crucial testimony about Aiko's accidental discovery. Ren's reaction to learning Daisuke's identity carried a quality more devastating than rage, the particular betrayal of discovering that someone trusted with his organization's most sensitive financial details for 15 years had been quietly stealing from him, while simultaneously orchestrating the kidnapping of his only daughter. 15 years, Ren said quietly, staring at evidence that confirmed exactly how thoroughly he had been deceived. 15 years of trust, and this is what it was worth to him. "We have enough evidence to move against him directly," Takeshi said. "But we don't know where he's holding Aiko. If we confront him without knowing her location first, he may eliminate her before we can intervene." The solution required patience neither man felt capable of in that exact moment, allowing Daisuke to believe his plan remained undiscovered while quietly tracking his movements, hoping he would eventually reveal Aiko's location through carelessness, born from confidence that his scheme had succeeded. The opportunity arrived 4 hours before the deadline, when surveillance revealed Daisuke making an unscheduled visit to a warehouse property officially registered under one of his shell investment companies, the exact kind of asset Takeshi's financial investigation had already flagged as suspicious. Ren assembled a small, carefully selected team rather than risking a larger force that might alert Daisuke to the discovery before they confirmed Aiko's location inside the warehouse. Takeshi led the approach personally, understanding that any mistake in the next several hours could cost Aiko her life, regardless of how thoroughly they had identified her captor. They found her inside a secured room on the warehouse's second floor, unharmed but clearly exhausted from nearly 2 days of captivity, guarded by only 2 men who had been told nothing about the actual reasons behind their assignment, simply paid soldiers following instructions from a superior they trusted without question. The confrontation with Daisuke himself took place in the warehouse's main floor, where Ren found him reviewing documents related to the shell companies that had concealed his theft for nearly 2 years. Utterly unaware that his carefully constructed deception had already unraveled completely. "You took my daughter," Ren said, his voice carrying a stillness more frightening than any shout could have achieved. 15 years of service, and this is the betrayal you chose." Daisuke's composure shattered immediately upon realizing discovery had arrived before his plan could succeed. "I never intended to hurt her. I needed leverage, nothing more. I was always going to release her once you stepped down. You kidnapped my daughter to force me out of leadership so you could continue stealing from this organization without consequence," Ren said. There was never a version of this plan that ended without consequences for everyone involved. The confrontation ended exactly as such. Betrayals within the clan's history always concluded through processes that remained, deliberately, contained entirely within organizational structures the outside world never witnessed. What mattered far more to everyone involved was Aiko's safe return, reunited with her father within hours of her rescue, the wedding celebration that had been violently interrupted, finally allowed to conclude under circumstances nobody could have anticipated when the day began. In the weeks that followed, Ren implemented changes to financial oversight that would have prevented Daisuke's theft from continuing undetected for nearly 2 years, multiple verification requirements that eliminated the kind of singular trust that had allowed one man's betrayal to nearly cost his daughter everything. Aiko, recovering from an ordeal that had transformed her wedding day into something neither she nor her father ever expected to survive, found herself viewing her father's world with new understanding. The constant vigilance he maintained throughout his life, suddenly making sense in ways she had never fully appreciated until experiencing exactly what that vigilance existed to prevent. "I always thought you were paranoid," she told him one evening, weeks after her rescue, watching him review the new financial protocols he had implemented since Daisuke's betrayal came to light. "Now I understand you were simply paying attention to threats most people never bother considering." Ren considered his daughter carefully, understanding that the woman sitting across from him had changed in ways that extended far beyond the physical ordeal she had survived. "Paranoia keeps you alive in this world. Trust without verification nearly cost me everything that actually matters." Hana's quiet honesty, the detail she had almost left unmentioned out of fear, it carried no real significance, ultimately became the thread that unraveled an entire conspiracy built on 15 years of carefully maintained deception. Her willingness to speak up, even when uncertain whether her information mattered, had saved Aiko's life in ways the clan would remember for years afterward. 6 months later, the Tanaka organization operated under security protocols far more rigorous than anything Ren had implemented throughout his previous 3 decades of leadership, built on the hard lesson that even the most trusted relationships required verification rather than blind faith alone. Aiko's marriage, having survived an ordeal that tested both families in ways nobody could have anticipated, emerged stronger for having weathered a crisis that revealed exactly how the people around them responded when everything they valued was suddenly placed at risk. And Ren Tanaka, the man who had built an empire on instinct and survived 3 decades of territorial warfare most rivals never outlasted, understood something his 15 years of trusting Daisuke had nearly cost him entirely. The most dangerous threats rarely arrived from outside the walls he had spent his life fortifying. They arrived from inside the rooms where trust had grown comfortable enough to stop asking the questions that actually mattered.